we've seen a mixed session for metals, copper down a bit in North America. Traders are continuing to digest news that the London Metals Exchange has decided against blocking deliveries of Russian metal into its warehouses. It's backing away from that. Some key metals, though, are making notable moves, including nickel. We saw a historic short squeeze in that metal in March. We are joined now by Lisa Reisman, CEO of MetalMiner. You've been around the metal markets for a while, expert on pricing and sourcing. Lisa, thanks very much for coming on the show again.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Can we kick off with nickel? We have a chart. Just remind us what happened in that squeeze earlier this year.
Right. So we saw this shocking run-up of prices back in the springtime. And then we had the London Metal Exchange essentially choosing one of the sides and essentially decided to unwind the positions of Tsingshan Holdings, which had caused that nickel price spike. Since then, the exchange has suffered from a lack of liquidity, which means a lot of volatility has been added into the exchange and into the nickel price in general. Mm-hmm. So we've also had a situation where nickel prices are trading a little higher on the London Metal Exchange than they are elsewhere. So I have to say the conditions may be ripe for another metal squeeze. We shall see that.
That's it. Illiquidity could produce that.
Yes, exactly. It's interjecting a lot more volatility.
And there was criticism of the London Metal Exchange after they reversed trades. I know this is a hard one to read, but are they likely to lose business to places like Shanghai?
I think at the moment the answer is yes, they could, because that's the only active large, nickel price exchange at the moment. But they haven't. Not everybody's trading there either, and it's not relevant for a lot of the markets. For example, in North America, we're not going to hedge metal on the Shanghai Futures Exchange. It doesn't make sense to do that. So, I think that's the issue there. But I don't think there's a replacement contract for the London Metal Exchange at this point.
And sorry, Lisa, is the nickel market tight? Is there reason to believe the price will go higher?
So that's what's really interesting. No, in fact, the market has been trading down. It was trading down. There's the delta between the London Metal Exchange and the rest of the world. Okay. However, in the last week or so, we've seen all three nickel, aluminum, and copper prices have all started to take off. And from a short-term perspective, they're all up above what we call that resistance level, the red line in our charts, if you've got one of our charts up.
We do.
And that's telling us there's a short-term kind of bullish, movement here. What we really are interested in seeing is whether or not the trend is going to change for the long term. And here we're a little more skeptical whether or not the longer-term trend will remain bullish. I think we're just seeing a lot of action right now.
What about aluminum? Russia is a pretty big supplier of aluminum. London Metals Exchange has said, nope, we're not going to ban that metal from Russia.
Yep, that's correct. What's interesting is the London Metal Exchange surveyed their main participants on that exchange, and the concern was that companies were self-banning, if you will, or self-sanctioning, I think is the term. And that actually hasn't really happened, is kind of what their conclusion was. And people very much still want to be able to access Russian metal. So the LME decided to continue with the status quo.
Okay. Will they they'll attract some criticism over that, I think, won't they, for not banning this Russian product?
I think it's interesting because here in the U.S., the Biden administration is also considering additional bans, including maybe a Russian metal ban. Yes. So I thought it was interesting. Maybe the London Metal Exchange wanted to get out in front of that, and it's why they kind of came out with their opinion on the matter as of last week, perhaps to influence the United States. I'm not sure, but I think it's interesting. Regardless, I don't think it's as bullish for the metal price as it was, say, last Thursday.
Let me see now. What have we got? Copper. You've got me thinking about politics there. It is interesting how that Washington has not banned Russian metals. Copper, what's the story there?
So kind of similar. I like copper because it's, they call it Dr. Copper for nothing, right? They call it Dr. Copper because it kind of projects forward where, a lot of the metals may go. I think what's interesting about copper, it's more keyed into the Fed interest rates and, of course, the DXY, the dollar index. And the dollar has fallen significantly, even from a week ago. Now trading, I checked this morning at about 106, 107. Of course, that inverse relationship is back in play and has been. So again, higher copper prices tend to be correlated with lower dollar value. So I think that's what's driving copper. And then the real question is, what's going to happen with China? Because China is going to decide one way or the other if metal prices are going to continue going up or down. We're a little more bearish on China demand at the moment, and we don't think this peak above these resistance levels, that red line, is going to maintain itself for any length of time. Of course, we could be wrong, especially if China opens up, for example, abandons its zero COVID policy. That could change things.
Longer term, though, is there reason to be bullish on copper with the massive electrification around the world?
That's the overall dynamic, right? I think if you kind of step back one step and just look at which narrative is stronger, the supply narrative or the demand narrative, and I'm speaking for 2022, I would say that the demand narrative is stronger, and the demand has been off, even with the electrification. Demand is just slower, all the rising interest rates, et cetera. Spending is coming down a little bit. So we've been a little more, skittish about rising prices longer term. That, of course, can shift at any time. So the fundamentals might say that copper should be bullish, but traders are saying, not so certain. But in the short term, it looks like certainly copper prices are up for the moment. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. I mean, broadly, as the world economy slows, are a lot of investors backing away? Generalist funds, are they backing away from the metals complex?
I would say in general it's been slower. So the volumes on the exchanges for all of the metals have been less than they've been earlier. And lower liquidity, again, increases the volatility. So it's been a very choppy year for metals. So again, a lot of people I think China and their COVID policies, they've also indicated a little bit of a pivot in moving more towards social structures as a priority over the economy. When I say social structures, I mean almost like a hat tip to more traditional Mao principles and ideology. I think that's going to be very interesting. At the same time, you've got their property sector that they look like just this morning, they seem to have created more stimulus. So, that's really the factors that we look at, what's going to happen longer term. So I don't know. I would say we're a little more leaning slightly more bearish on China at the moment, which I think is going to keep metal prices somewhat muted, even though we have this kind of short-term excitement in the last couple of days.
Lisa, we've only got 30 seconds. Have you spent much time on lithium? Have you thought about lithium much? Or you're a busy lady, I know, but sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. No, actually, we've just added a whole bunch of battery metals into our platform. We are indeed tracking and forecasting the different lithium products. Lithium looks pretty similar to copper, actually. So that's just, and it's very interesting. We've gotten a lot more demand from clients and prospects for all of the battery metals, lithium, cobalt, silicon, all of those types of things that go into EVs and the electrification, grid projects, et cetera. So hot topic for sure.
We'll have to have you